like, the version of food stamp, you get a card, like you get a gas card, like you get 4 Squirts or whatever that's called. Like there's different ways to maybe get beyond the home heating, to the gas pump to other places.
Lots of unregulated fuels. I can solve a whole bunch for us.
Yeah, actually we've been talking about problem with low income and also the effect on businesses if you do a carbon tax. And there's some ways to take care of that pretty easily.
Like what?
Well, you give low income an exemption, and you could possibly give tax credits to businesses. That was one thing that's floated. I'm not part of that subcommittee. But there's been consideration at least, I'm not sure. But basically the mission of the Thermal Efficiency Task Force was to present all the players in the Public Service Board how to get to 80,000 homes by 2020. And we're supposed to give you some financing options, but it's really not up to us to say, well, this is really the essential core of the program, and this is like peripheral, because that's your job. So, good luck.
Yes. I want to take this from the bottom side. We work with a large population of people who are minimally employed or want to go to work. One of the things we've talked about with various legislators and with the administration officials and department officials over the past 3 years has been a unified communication and application process that gives people the supports they need to get to work, to pay taxes, to pay into the things we're talking about. AHS took a look at that a few years ago, came up with a 28-page unified application that was not accessible online and was not accessible to people with various disabilities. I mentioned again this year to Secretary Racine and Governor Shumlin and then Commissioner Flood, who said, well, bring it up to your legislators again next year. If you have people who are filling out a 6-page, 3 squares application, a 5-page, or sorry, a 2-page LIHEAP application, an 8-page vocational rehabilitation application, which doesn't automatically link to the Department of Employment, Labor and Training for registration with job, which is another 4-page application. And then they're told, because they have an entrepreneurial spirit, great, we're going to send you to a Community Action Council where you'll fill out a 6 to a 10-page application to be admitted into a program for micro-enterprise development. And as much as I hate to admit it, we have people who say, why? I can get by on my general assistance and my disability payment. I wanted to go to work, but you've just made it so difficult for me. Why should I? Which means the person who's looking for an apprentice program for plumbing, electrical, carpentry, there's one less applicant. Is there any way we can tie this into the overall economic development for our state? Perhaps simplify some of it the way Idaho, Wisconsin, Colorado, and Oregon have done. And at the risk of really sounding horrible, look at our IT infrastructure, and instead of, as was pointed out this past weekend, with the multiple $100,000 contracts to investigate what's wrong and why it hasn't worked yet, perhaps just say, let's start from what we really want to accomplish. How do we get people the supports they need to go to work in a way that benefits primarily small businesses in Vermont and increases our tax revenues for people working?
Sounds good to me. No, especially if there are states that have done it, it would be easy enough to put in some, legislation that says we're going to do this.
When I approached the 2 other senators last year, very supportive, good people. I do believe that our legislators are good people with great hearts and great passion. I was told one of the same things I was told when I first moved here a decade ago. Well, that's not Vermont. And I got to tell you, Representative and Senator, personally and professionally, I'm kind of tired of hearing about well, that's not Vermont and that won't work here. Other places have done things. And of course, it's not ideal for any given state. But we can take models that are out there and adapt them, personalize them for ourselves. I'm sorry, that was an uncalled for soapbox. My apologies.
But you're talking about like one, let's say, simple,
Universal form,
relatively short universal form
Sure.
that would apply to social programs and job programs.
Yes. And that they would link, that when
Right.
I register with VR,
Right,
employment training already has my core info.
right.
You know, when we survey our members every year, so we're 1,200 members all across the state, every size, sector, everything, and we say, you know, is Vermont a good place to do business or not, and why, and we dig down, and one of the things that we, in the top 3 every year is because government is accessible. Yeah, we can bump into Tony on the street, we can bump into the governor in town, you know, and I'm often disappointed because we should be so much more nimble, we're so small, you know, I mean, everybody's well-intentioned, but we need to implement, you know, some of these efficiency ideas. And, you know, I don't know, like, you know, there's the bureaucracy, I was a bureaucrat for 16 years, I get bureaucracy, you know, things kind of, you get a little in a rut, you get a little, you know, how do you shake things up to improve systems? Because as business people, we're looking to raise money for healthcare reform, we're looking to raise money for energy. We gotta, you know, we can't be wasting our time filling out forms either. You know, we just don't have time for this. We need to, you know, do business and hire people and make money.
So from my perspective, the answer is you, I don't mean you specifically, but you generally, you design the form and bring it to us in the legislature, we'll adopt it. But what happens now is that folks bring us the problem. And we're just a bunch of nummies, so, you know, so asking us to figure out a form is not the best way to do it.
Maybe you could get the video game people to do it.
Put a gun in
I don't have one specific issue, but I wanted to make a couple comments. It was really nice to hear from you and get a sense of what you're doing. One is, in terms of the internet providers, it's a great network in Burlington that CO and Blue Cypher were part of, and so that, you know, just to
Yeah, it
remind
wouldn't
you that
necessarily
was
just be
Vermont,
for
so
Central Vermont, it's just that this, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree, so that one's a good model.
In fact, some of the people I met in Montpelier were actually from the Burlington network.
Okay.
The meeting just happened to be in Montpelier.
Right, yeah. I love hearing about land use planning bill, which I think has also been a gap for years, and I was really interested and involved in the Act 200 discussions back when, so I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that and finding out
Well,
more what it's about.
they're gonna come out of the woodwork this time.
I'm sure, yeah. And I'm going to tell you, one of the things I'm most worried about personally, just in terms of my own well-being as a small business person, is how the health care reform is going to get funded and built over the next couple of years. And it's kind of useful to know which conversation is with the administration and which is with the legislature. So I'll be curious in terms of figuring out what the legislature gets to comment on, because this whole business of, you know, the exchange needs to be built, and in some ways that's a simpler project than building single payer. And it's so important that it gets built with the right steps in conversation with providers so that there's not expensive redundancies built in, you know, that we might not get to implement. It's got to really be done in a step-by-step way. So that's a conversation I'm kind of interested in sorting out what the legislature is going to be commenting on and hearing about, and sort of not getting snowed by, you know, the ideals of single payer or the exchange or whatever. It's, you know, the practicalities I think are really, really tricky, and I don't have a good answer for how to fund it. So I just wanted to say I think that's my single biggest pocketbook concern as a small business
Well,
person.
simple answer, because I don't think any of us know the answer to that question, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But is now that the Green Mountain Care Board is operating, and they're overseeing a bunch of the different reforms that have to do with payment reform and healthcare delivery. So a lot of that will happen through the board. what the legislature has to do, and there are two things we kind of have to do, is approve what I always call the package of care. I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it, but will dental care be covered? Will podiatry be covered? Or aromatherapy going to be covered? That kind of stuff. The broad question as to what will be included in what I call the package of care, the coverage, the legislature has to approve that. And the legislature approves it by approving or not the funding for it. So essentially the administration will come forward and say, this is what we think Green Mountain Care, yes, this is what Green Mountain Care will look like. It'll cover these things. Unfortunately, it's not going to cover this, let's say.